My name is Conn, and I was involved in a Middle English graduate course, and that's why I decided to work with the text that I did. It's called Havelock the Dane. It's a Middle English text from about the turn of the 14th century, and I wrote about issues around orality, actually, and as well as kind of the origins of this tale, because what I found with my research is that there seems to be kind of this argument around the origins of the Havelock tale as to whether it came out of a written tradition, so two earlier texts essentially, or whether it came out of an oral tradition like much of or most of the Middle English texts did, which were spoken before they were actually written. And this kind of led me down the path of examining the oral aspects of the tale. And what I found was that the Havelock poet was doing something really interesting. So he was actually positioning his written work as an oral text. So, the narrator kind of came across as a speaker, and the reader was positioned as an audience. And there were other devices around the structure of the tale, so kind of the parallel narratives and the very simplistic rhyme scheme. All of these kind of worked towards this, I guess, presence of oral aspects, the fact that it was meant to be taken as an oral tale instead of a written work. And this in itself is not particularly problematic, but the fact that it was written at a time when oral culture was already declining does make it slightly problematic, and it suggested to me some anxieties around the ability of language to hold meaning at a most basic level, or the ability of the spoken word to be permanent, to endure. And I took that kind of seed, that idea, that argument, and I moved it with me as I looked through the rest of the text, and I examined two pivotal oath scenes and that involve verbal vows. And these moments are so interesting because they don't have any written documents. There are no papers signed, and what happens is a king is actually willing his land, his children, his kingdom to another man on his deathbed. And it's purely spoken, this agreement between them. And instead of there being written documents, what actually happens is there are these physical objects brought in. They're Mass and Eucharistic elements. And in the same way that in the Eucharist, the abstract concept of God, of Heavenly Father, is grounded in these concrete, consecrated items, the bread and the wine. That's what the attempt seems to be in this tale. The king seems to be trying to ground those vows, those verbal vows, in physical holy objects. And what comes to be seen as the tale moves on is that fails, is that orality is somehow always insufficient and cannot hold stable meaning because the vows are broken, and they're not only broken but quickly and readily broken. And so what I think one is left with is this question, if orality is not enough, then what is? And what I argue that the poet proposes is that a kind of collective voice is enough to hold truth or to contain meaning, stable meaning. Because at the end there's this voice of the collective that condemn the men who broke their oaths. And it's a more objective truth that's presented instead of just the kind of singular truth for one individual, the subjective truth. There's a move toward a more objective truth. So we're not quite to the shift away from orality into written documents, but there is a very real anxiety being presented around meaning and orality and what comes next as we move into this kind of cultural shift during that time.
Well, thank you.